Oh yeah, welcome back to AP World History with me, Mr. Leveridge. Today is Unit 1, Day 9, where we're going to talk about the Mongols. Please make sure that you have your history notebook out and you're taking notes as you move through the video. Please make sure that you're also completing the vocabulary for this video, which will be on the next slide and also down in the description. Let's go ahead and get started. So today's key terms are Chinggis Khan, Kublai Khan, the Ilkhanate, Yuan Dynasty, Golden Horde, the Changhati Dynasty, the Tribute Empire, the Pax Mongoica, Timur the Lame, the Ottoman Empire, Osman the Great, and Mehmed the Great II. We'll talk about Chinggis Khan, who's also known as Genghis Khan's background and rule. We'll talk about Mongol rule after the Khan, and nomadic dynasties such as the Turks and the Timur Lame. So Chinggis Khan, also known as Genghis Khan, is known as the universal leader. He's the one who's going to unite the Mongol tribes by alliance and conquest, and he's going to merge them into an empire. The Mongols are really going to spread all over Eurasia, but they really start with a conquest of northern China, where they kind of overthrow a small, kind of not unimportant dynasty, but a less influential dynasty, the Xizia. Well, the Mongols conquered the northern part of China. The Song dynasty that we talked about previously in this unit will still control most of central and southern China. Towns who resisted the Mongol rule were often used as examples. Kind of some a few examples of how they were used as examples. If you resist, if you fought back, they were going to wipe out all the women and children, and they're going to brutalize the men. Right? There is times where a town or city would resist, and they would capture, say, children, and then launch those children over their walls to kind of force them to surrender. And then they would still wipe them out because they had the gall to resist the Mongol Empire. In that same vein, if you surrendered immediately, the Mongols were fairly tolerant, and in their tolerance, they supported all religions that were in their empire as long as you paid your taxes and you didn't resist. There's going to be a few instances in Russia where the Russians resist, and they finally capture the city. They wipe out all the women and children, and then they line up all the enemy soldiers, the men soldiers. They put them on the ground, put tables and wood and wooden planks all over them, and have a party till everyone died. So I mentioned this to show that the Mongols aren't playing around. But if you submit and you surrender yourself to the Mongols, they're fairly tolerant. Now, the Mongol conquest of Persia or the Middle East, they didn't want to conquer Persia. They wanted trade and diplomatic relations with Persia, but a sultan of the region, Kharazim, he murders the envoys, which is a big no-no. And the Mongol forces wipe out Persia, right? And destroy it. Like towns, cities, whatever, it's just gone. Chinggis Khan does die in 1227, and he lays the foundation for a mighty empire. Mongol rule was generally very tolerant, and they're going to use intellectuals from all over their conquered kingdoms. They use them to teach, to run bureaucracy. And again, as I said before, they offer religious tolerance for Confucians, Buddhists, Taoists, Muslims, and even Christians when they start to conquer Christian kingdoms. Administrators are drawn, the way they run their empire is drawn from Islamic and the Chinese worlds. They formulate a legal code, which kind of puts it into tribal and clan divisions. They really do try to make it so all these different groups can live together in peace. And due to this, trade and cultural exchange flourished. The Mongol heirs, or the sons and daughters of Genghis Khan, is going to separate themselves into 4 regional empires. Now, as I said, there was many ways that the Mongols would set an example. I said one about dancing and having a party on the bodies of living soldiers, but also there's boiling alive, there's firing bubonic plague and smallpox blankets over walls. They were really ingenious in way that they conquered and kind of used warfare. Now, the Mongol war machine, Mongol warriors were excellent horsemen. They pretty much lived, breathed, and died in their horses. Mongol horsemen and Mongols were in the saddle by age of 4 or 5. They learned to hunt. They were accomplished archers. And all of this started when they were children. Mongol armies were entirely cavalry, and they depended on speed and mobility in assault. If you can get around them, you can destroy them. That's the Mongol kind of philosophy. Now, the Mongol empires after Chinggis Khan, our first one is going to be in China, which is we're going to talk about is in China, which is Kublai Khan, and this is Chinggis Khan's grandson. He's going to consolidate Mongol rule in China, and he's finally going to conquer the Song Dynasty in 1276, and he's going to establish the Yuan Dynasty in 1279. But he's going to have unsuccessful conquest in Vietnam, Burma, Java, and Japan, where the Mongols really are going to get pushed back and kind of told and kind of forced to stay in China. And the Mongol rule in China had the central administration was reserved for Mongols, allies, and foreigners. They did not want any Chinese administrators in charge of China. They're going to dismiss all Confucian scholars. They're going to dismantle the civil service exam, which is really going to anger Confucianists. They're going to favor merchants, cities, and peasants over the Chinese elite. And this kind of hatred for the Chinese elite is really going to show into their social policies, where they're not going to allow Mongols to settle in China, nor the Chinese to settle in Mongolia. And even further, they're going to outlaw intermarriage between the Mongols and the Chinese. So a Chinese woman cannot marry a Mongolian man, and a Mongolian man cannot marry a Chinese woman, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, while they don't like Confucianism and they don't like Chinese elites, they're still going to promote Buddhism. They're going to support the Taoists and Muslims and Christians of the region. And at the same time, they don't want the Chinese to gain any foothold or understanding of Mongol politics, so they're going to forbade the Chinese from learning the Mongol language. At the same time, Mongol women, who are already more influential and have more power than a Chinese woman, are not going to adopt Chinese customs, so Mongol women will not participate in foot binding. Now, Mongols in Southwest and Central Asia, this is going to be the Middle East. They're going to destroy many cities in Persia and along the Middle East, and they're going to capture Baghdad in 1258. And the lands fell to the Ilkhanate of Persia, which is the Mongol Empire in Persia. But they're going to allow Persians to serve as ministers, governors, and local officials. Mongols only cared about taxes and wealth and making sure that nobody resisted them, so they care about order and laws. The icon is going to convert to Islam in 1297 or 1295 and really begin to massacre Jews and Christians in the Middle East. But they're pretty much going to be kind of held and kept in the Middle East as the Mamelukes of Egypt are going to defeat the Mongol invasion of Africa. But the Mongol impact on Europe and the Islamic world is in the Middle East. They're going to adopt the use of gunpowder and the Mongol conquest. But at the same time, the Mongol conquest are going to facilitate trade from east to west more so than previously. At the same time, it's not also a good thing because trade, when the Black Plague and the Black Death really starts to pop up, it's going to transmit plague across the Black Plague across these trade routes. Now, the Mongols and Europe, Russia falls pretty quickly. They fall under the rule of the Khanate of the Golden Horde. The Mongol conquest of Russia reduces the princes of Russia to tribute payers. Peasants are reduced to serfdom. But this is also going to be the rise of Moscow as a main hub of Russia, because it profited because that was the main center of tribute collection. In the 1380s, the princes of Moscow turned against the Mongols and lead an alliance that defeat the Mongols at the Battle of Kulikova. But the Mongol conquest of Russia does ensure changes. The central position of Moscow in the Orthodox Church becomes extremely important because Moscow suddenly becomes the center of Russian kind of business and government. Uh, but at the same time, Mongol dominance also cuts off the Russia from Western Europe, both politically and culturally. So Russia will be kind of like a bastion of its own kind of culture and kind of governmental thought. At first, Christian reaction to the Mongol invasions was positive. They were convinced the Mongols were potential allies against the Muslims. But when the Mongols attacked Russia, they proved their optimism was a miscalculation. Now, the Golden Horde will survive into, I believe, the 1600s to 1650s. But after that, it will fall to just becoming more Russian. Now, the Russians and Eurasia. The result of Mongols' conquest, the empire created the largest zone of continuous rule in history. The empire created a period of peace and prosperity called the Pax Mongoica. The Mongols were a tribute empire. Trade was often a byproduct of this tribute. You got to go to the place to give tribute. Might as well trade with while you're there. They did work to secure trade routes and ensure safety of merchants. They did form merchant trade associations with insurance, meaning that, hey, if we can't protect you going to the place, we'll pay back your the fee and your lost profits. Right? They established what is known as postal stations, where they create letters and trade networks and relay stations. They're going to unite Eastern Europe, Southwest Asia, South Asia, and East Asian trade. But at the same time, while they were unable to conquer Korea, Vietnam, India, Europe, they do kind of establish kind of friendly relations and diplomatic relations with them. And again, the Mongols would resettle like artisans and educated individuals to make their rule smarter and to make their rule more efficient. So they're taking the best of everything they've conquered and kind of melding into one to make it the best that it can, so it doesn't fall like the empires that they conquered. So they're trying to truly make an empire that lasts forever. Now, exchanges during the Mongol period. From Europe, we get honey, horses, glassware, and slaves from the Caucasus regions. And what they're going to get from Europe is Christian missionaries, Italian merchants, and European diplomats. Goods from Southwest Asia are going to be textiles, rugs, incense, iron, and gold products. The people they're going to get from Southwest Asia are going to be Muslim merchants, Nestorian merchants, and Muslim diplomats. From South Asia, they're going to get spices, gems, perfume, and textiles. Who they're going to get from South Asia is Indian merchants and diplomats. From East Asia, they're going to get gunpowder, firearms, rockets, magnetic compass, porcelain, silk, maritime technology, paper making, printing, and tea. Who they're going to get is going to be Buddhist religious objects, Chinese bureaucrats, Chinese artists and artisans, and East Asian diplomats. They're also going to get the Black Death or the Black Plague is going to begin in East Asia. Now, just like all empires, they do decline. Major reasons for their decline were they were too few in number. You can't control a massive area when you're small. When your group of people is small, controlling a massive area becomes difficult. Any intermarriage resulted in loss of the Mongol identity. Even though they outlaw it in most places, love finds a way, and people get married and they lose their Mongol identity. And also, settled populations really begin to use firearms. With the increase in firearms and the increase in access to firearms, a gun is going to be more efficient than a archer, right? Especially if you can hit your target, and a gun is extremely more efficient than a horse. The collapse of the Persian Ilkhanate, excessive spending, over-exploitation, reduced revenues, intermarriage with the Mongol local populations, factional struggles plagued the Mongol leadership, and then finally the nail in the coffin as the last ruler died without an heir, so there was no one to continue the rule, thus causing it to collapse. The decline of the Yuan Dynasty, hyperinflation due to the increase of paper money, power struggles, assassinations, and civil wars in the 1320s, and the bubonic plague hits China in the 1330s. So you got civil war, you got fighting, Next thing you know, all your population is dying. It just doesn't work. You don't have anybody to rule over because they're all dead. The surviving Mongol Khanates are going to be the Changhai, will continue in Central Asia to the 1700s, and the Golden Horde will survive again until the mid 16th century, the 1550s, not the 1650s. Sorry. Now, also we have Timur Lane, the Whirlwind. He's also, this gentleman is Timur the Lame. He's a conqueror. He's self-made. He rose from poverty to power in 1360. He's going to unite the tribes of Central Asia. He's going to conquer Persia, Afghanistan, the Central Horde, and northern India. He's going to attack the Golden Horde, but he won't become very successful. He ruled through tribal leaders. He relied on existing bureaucrats to collect taxes. He's going to use terror as a weapon, in some cases more efficiently than the Mongols. He's not interested in rule. He's more interested in money and plunder. But after he dies, it falls apart. The heirs struggle and divide the empire, and his grandson will establish the Mughals, which we'll talk about next unit. Our next big one is going to be the Turks and the foundation of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Turks settled on the Byzantine border. They established a warrior society raiding the Byzantines. We have Osman the Great. He's going to carve out a state in northwest Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey. And they're going to conquer the Balkans in the 1350s. They're going to raid into Europe at Gallipoli. Mehmed II will conquer Constantinople. And during the 16th century, they're going to expand their empire into Southwest Asia, Southeast Europe, and Northern Africa, and truly become the Ottoman Empire, which will last up until the 20th century, and into the 20th century. So that's where we're going to end today. Please make sure that you are following along with your notes, and that you're also completing the vocabulary, which is at the beginning of the video and down in the description. Thank you guys, and I'll see you guys in class.